Ready? Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Jayan Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parudikacharya Ashtottara Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parudikacharya Ashtottara Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavanda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Kwantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 14th day of March 2024 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace HG Dravida Swami Prabhupada. And we are in Canto 7, The Science of God, Chapter 7, What Prahlad Learned in the Womb, text number 23. Dehas tu sarva sanghato jagat tastur iti dvidha atraiva mrigaya purusho neti netiti atat tyajan dehas tu sarva sanghato jagatasturati dvidha atraiva mrigyak purusho. Atraiva mrigyak purusho neti neti chitatyajan dehastu sarva sanghato jagatasturati dvidha atraiva mrigyak purusho neti neti chitatyajan dehastu sarva sanghato jagatasturati dvidha atraiva mrigyak purusho neti neti chitatyajan dehastu sarva sanghato jagatasturati dvidha mrigyak purusho neti neti chitatyajan dehastu sarva sanghato jagatasturati dvidha atraiva mrigyak purusho neti neti chitatyajan. Someone else? Dehastu sarva sanghato tasturati dvidha mrigyak purusho neti neti chitatyajan. Dehastu sarva sanghato jagatasturati dvidha atraiva mrigyak purusho neti neti chitatyajan. You can do. Dehastu sarva sanghato jagatasturati dvidha atraiva mrigyak purusho neti neti chitatyajan. Dehastu sarva sanghato jagatasturati dvidha atraiva mrigyak purusho neti neti chitatyajan. Anyone online?
Dehastu sarva sanghato
Dehastu sarva sanghato
jagatastur iti didha
jagatasturati dvidha
atraiva mrigyak purusho
atraiva mrigyak purusho
neti netiti atatyajan
neti neti chitatyajan. Deha, the body. Tu, but. Sarva sanghataha, the combination of all the 24 elements. Jagat, seen to be moving. Tastuhu, and standing in one place. Iti, thus. Dvidha, two kinds. Atra eva, in this matter. Mrigyaha, to be searched for. Purushaha, the living entity, the soul. Na, not. Iti, thus. Na, not. Iti, thus. iti, in this way. Atat, what is not spirit, tyajan, giving up. Prahlad continued with his classmates. There are two kinds of bodies for every individual soul. The gross body made of 5 gross elements, and the subtle body made of 3 subtle elements. Within these bodies, however, is the spirit soul. One must find the soul by analysis, saying, this is not it, this is not it. Thus one must separate spirit from matter. All right, repeat after me. There are two kinds of bodies for every individual soul. A gross body made of 5 gross elements, and a subtle body made of 3 subtle elements. Within these bodies, however, is the spirit soul. One must find the soul by analysis, saying, this is not it, this is not it. Or rather, this is not it, this is not it. Thus one must separate spirit from matter. Purport. As previously stated, Svarnam yata gravasu he makara chaitreshu yogais tadabhigya apnuyat. An expert in the study of soil can find out where gold is and then dig there. He can then analyze the stone and test the gold with nitric acid. Similarly, one must analyze the whole body to find within the body the spirit soul. In studying one's own body, one must ask himself whether his head is his soul, his fingers are his soul, his hand is his soul, and so on. In this way, one must gradually reject all the material elements and the combinations of material elements in the body. Then, if one is expert and follows the acharya, he can understand that he is the spiritual soul living within the body. The greatest acharya, Krishna, begins his teachings in the Bhagavad Gita thus by saying, Dehinosmin yata dehe tata dehantara praptir. We had this verse in the previous purport, ever fresh. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. The sober person is not bewildered by such a change. Bhagavad Gita 2:13. By the way, for all class givers in the future, it's good to read the references. I know some devotees are leaving those out, but when it's in parentheses. The spirit soul possesses the body and is within the body. This is the real analysis. The soul never mixes with the bodily elements. Although the soul is within the body, it is separate and always pure. One must analyze and understand his self. This is self-realization. Neti is the analytical process of rejecting matter. By expertly conducting such an analysis, one can understand where the soul is. One who is not expert, however, cannot distinguish gold from earth, nor the soul from the body. Om jnana timirandasya jnanandana shalakaya chakshu unmilitam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and to all members of Sri Parampara. So Prahlad is giving his classmates kind of a crash course in Sankhya here. And oftentimes devotees kind of know about this, but they don't think it's that important to study because we're basically chanting Hare Krishna and doing all kinds of services. But this repeatedly comes up in the Bhagavatam, as has been pointed out in the purport, that Kapila Dev gives an exhaustive explanation of these things. I always found it so fascinating that, the false ego in contact with the mode of goodness produces the mind. False ego when in contact with the mode of ignorance produces the gross senses and all these things. And how this is how everything develops gradually in creation. So this neti process, that's kind of a shortcut that, now we're talking about impersonalism, right? But actually, that's also a process that we can use to help us find out what is not the self. The whole problem in the material world is that we're identifying things that aren't the self as our self. The bodily concept of life. I like to point out, I think I used this last night, that if you go through a stop sign and the cops stop you, right? Then they come up to your window, you have to roll it down or push it down. License and registration, right? They want to make sure that you are the person who's authorized to be driving this car. And so you give them the license, and what's on the license? Well, there's a picture of you. That's the first thing. And I think it tells your weight, your eye color, your address, all these things that define you as the body. Because all your address is where your body lives, your hair color has to do it. So these are all bodily designations. And commonly, that's the grounding or the essential problem in materialistic life, is identification with something with not, namely the physical body. And the first step, as Krishna, this is one of the first verses Krishna speaks in the Bhagavad Gita as the guru. He says a few things before that. But when Arjuna surrenders, right? Karpanyadosho pahada sobhava prachamitvam dharma samudra cheta. I'm completely at a loss as to what's real dharma. My actual nature has been stolen away by this miserly weakness, my kshatriya nature. And so I'm approaching you, Krishna, please instruct me for sure what is the path to my ultimate shreya, my good fortune, and by extension everyone else also. Now I surrender to you. So that's a critical point in which Arjuna admits what we all have to admit at a certain point. I don't know. I cannot figure out what's best for me. I tried this, I tried that, and I'm still miserable. So that's the first recognition. And Krishna begins his instruction. This is a couple of verses before this. First, he's chastising, which is the same theme. You're lamenting for what is not worthy of grief, the material body. You're afraid, you're terrified of participating in the death of your beloved guru and the teacher, martial arts teacher, and of course Bhishma Dev. That was the first, and then there was a whole others. There's a whole list. There's one purport in the first chapter where Arjuna is looking out at the both armies. First the opposing army, then his own army scene, and then there's a list of individuals in the purport, and they're all friends or relatives, and all of them, as is pointed out by Vishwanath Chakravarti in his commentary, or Baladev in his commentary, Baladev Vibhushan, they're all in the opposing army. Now, he's got, of course, many allies and friends and relatives in his own army, but both armies contain people dear to him. So he says, what's the point of fighting this battle? Even if I do win the kingdom, it'll be soaked with the blood of those who I love, and how am I going to enjoy that? In other words, he's thinking materially, what's the advantage? So he comes to the conclusion, I'm just going to leave the battlefield, I'll just go become a beggar, which he's not suited to do because he's a Kshatriya. But that's his solution, and it's no solution at all. So he's in an ontological crisis, so he just sits down, drops his bow, which is a really critical thing for a Kshatriya. I heard once that Arjuna had a rule that everyone knew about, that if anyone suggests he put his bow down, then he's an enemy, and he risks being shot. So now he voluntarily drops it. And so his only hope is that Krishna will then instruct him. So Krishna begins by chastising him. You're speaking like a pundit quoting the Vedas. If you call, his argument in the first canto, he's talking about Bhivana Shankara, and no one will be able to perform the Shraddha ceremonies, and I'll be responsible, so I'll go to hell with everyone else. That was his argument. He's arguing from the Vedas. But he says, well, those speaking learned words, you don't know what you're talking about. You're not really a scholar, a pundit, a shochana. You're lamenting for what is not worthy of grief, namely the material body. And Krishna directly says right there, the next verse. Does anyone know the next verse? It was quoted, Amoga. Natve vaham jatu nasam natvam neme janadipa nachaiva nabhavishama sarve vayamatakparam. Never was a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these warriors, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. And by implication, It's all that we exist now. So we're existing in the past, we exist now, and we'll all exist in the future. So where's the sense of lamentation? Immediately he's saying that you're lamenting for the external to the, so the whole, and then comes this verse, Dehinos minyata dehe. And so Krishna is giving a little lesson here in the A of the ABC of spiritual life, is that you have to understand who you really are, what you really are, before you hear anything. Wasn't that the first question of Sanatan? Kayami. Kayami. I always confuse it. It's not his name. What is it? It's not Kayami. Kaimi. Similar. So anyway, so who am I and why am I suffering? Right? And how can I get out of it? You know? Well, you're suffering primarily because you're thinking you're something you're not. And you're putting all the stress on body and body relationships like that. So this is the first lesson to his classmates. He's getting it, and he's going through a little crash course on the Sankhya. He's talked about the 8, of course, material elements, gross and subtle. And then the 10 senses. Why is it 10 senses? I was always taught in 3rd grade we only have 5 senses. You remember that, Sankarshan? You have the eyes, the ears, everyone knows those are the senses. So then, well, no, it's not the mind, but there's the knowledge acquiring senses called Gyanendriya, which we commonly call senses, and then there's the active senses, hands, the feet, and the voice, which is so important, and the genitals and the excretory functions. So those are the 10 senses. So you have your 10, then you have your 8 material elements, bhumar, appa, olanobhaya, etc. Then you have the 5 tanmatras. So you have 18 there, then you have 5. I mentioned this the other day because there's a mistake in the translation, where it mentions the 5 gross elements as, it should be the 5 tanmatras, which is sound, the sense of things that you hear, and see, of course, and touch, taste, and smell. So you get 23 there, and the 24th element is the soul, conditioned soul. So those 24, that's what makes up our environment, really. And it's important to understand that. All of that is not you, that's not us. This is all given to us when we want to leave the spiritual world, and we need a way of interacting with the material world to try to enjoy and exploit it. And so that's the arrangement that Krishna has. How it develops over time. So the question is, okay, well, we're so conditioned to identifying with that. What can we do in order to get out of that ignorance, that misidentification, and begin to identify ourselves as a soul and live on the spiritual platform? And that's the process of yoga, especially Bhakti yoga. To use those very senses and those very tanmatras. This comes up in the Bhagavad Gita, I think in the 4th chapter we study. To connect with the pure spirit. In other words, we have a choice. We have a choice. We can simply try to enjoy sense gratification, which is why we came here. Or we can hear knowledge like this and how to control the senses and direct them in such a way that they can connect us to Krishna. And what's the most important sense for connecting to Krishna? Yes, the ear. To hear the pure sound vibrations emanating from the mouth of the realized soul. That is essential. Now, that's what book distribution is all about. Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta was very eager to print books, and Srila Prabhupada inherited that. If you ever get money, print books, and he was a writer. It was all really before the dominance of the internet and hearing, this media. That's also very potent. But if you have a book, if you have some written thing, you can relate to it. You can go over it. You can take notes. There's an advantage. In any case, reading or hearing, like we do every morning, Prabhupada was insistent on the class and morning. And in my day, it was morning and evening. Right? That's why we're trying to keep the Bhagavad Gita class going, evening program. because that sound is potent. It's filled with spiritual potencies. When you have the pure devotee, someone who's speaking from absolute realization, speaking or writing or giving you his realizations, that has the potency to really revolutionize your whole understanding of who you are, and to inspire you to take up the process, because there's a process by which you use the senses, and it's also built around hearing and chanting. Those are the two foundational practices of devotional service: Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. I like to refer to this Ashtaka. There's a few Ashtakas embedded in the Bhagavatam. There's a Sadhu Sangashtaka in the third canto. This is practically the beginning of Kapila Dev's teachings to his mother, Devahuti. It's 3:25:20 through 27. There's 8 verses there. And there's, two extremely famous verses that people all reckon, those who have been around a while. Tatikshava karunika suridak sarvadehinam. And it's the same theme as this one and the other Ashtaka I discovered at the very end of the Bhagavatam, 12th canto, 12th chapter, I think, maybe 13th chapter. The Krishna Katashtaka. There are 8 verses that glorify hearing and chanting, and then the last 2 verses give you the fruit of that, which I'll share with you in a minute. So actually, both of those, they complement each other, because who are you going to hear from? You got to hear from the sadhu. So the first verse goes like this. I put it into a little poem, but the Sanskrit is prasangam ajaram pasham atmanak kavayo vidu saheva sadhu shukuto moksha dwaram aparvatam. That phrase, moksha dwaram, may be familiar from the 5th canto with Rishabdev. Open the door to liberation. So mundane affection keeps us tied to birth and death, infernal. But love for sadhus opens wide the doors to life eternal. So who's the sadhu? Then the next question is, all right, where can I find that sadhu? So then 3 verses describes the qualities and activities of a sadhu. And this next verse we should all know. Titikshava karunika suridak sarvadehinam ajata shatavak shantha sadhavak sarabhushana. Now that perfectly describes Prahlad, who we're hearing about right now. So it's interesting, there's these qualities, but it doesn't mention bhakti. That's in the next verse. Titikshava means tolerance, and Titikshava karunika means full of compassion. And of course, if you're going to preach, you got to be compassionate, and you got to be tolerant. Right? Those are 2 qualities. And that's what the sadhu is doing. He's trying to enlighten others. Titikshava karana suridak sarvadehinam, the friend of all living entities. Not just human beings, but everyone. He tries to give them Krishna consciousness, or at least not to harm them. Suridak sarvadehinam ajata shatravak, and his enemy is never born. In other words, he has no enmity toward anyone. And therefore, all these shanta, supremely peaceful, Sadhavak sadhabhushana, these are the ornaments of a sadhu. And then he says, well, how did he get that way? Bhakti. So then Kapila Dev says, as an incarnation, he's taking that, that's who he is. Says, Maya nanyena bhavena bhakti kurvanti yedvidham matkrute chakta karmanas chakta swajana bandhava. So, unto me, performing unalloyed devotional service. Mai ananyena bhavena. Ananya without any, admixture. Bhaktim, with dridham, with great determination. Matkrute chakta karmanas. For my sake, giving up any activity that they may be performing. That's out of the realm. And even chakta swajana bandhava, if they're association with their friends and family is a real blockage, then they give that up also, And then what do? Madashriya. Now ashriya sounds like, what it means. It's ashram, it's taking shelter. But it also means related to. It can be, so that's what Madashriya, related to me, kata, mrishta. The sweet vibrations related to me, holy name, other descriptions. Kata mishta, shinvanti katayanticha. Hearing and chanting. Madashriya, kata mishta, Shinbandi katayanticha tapandi vivadastapan naitad mankata chetasa. And therefore, the pains that suffering that naturally comes in the material world don't affect them as much, because their minds are on me, they're absorbed in me. And this is how we can find Prahlad being completely peaceful and blissful, being dipped into a vat of boiling ghee. He's protected by Krishna, and he's not uninjured, and he's completely peaceful and happy. Absolute absorption in Krishna. It sounds impossible, but that's what he did. That's what we just read about last chapter. So that's a very important thing, because then after the question, who am I? And it goes through this whole thing, you know, of the Sankhya. The next question is, why am I suffering? And so they go together. If you can identify yourself as you really are, as pure spirit, part and parcel of Krishna, and completely absorbed in thinking of Krishna, then you won't be suffering anymore, even in this material world. That's why it says the pure devotee has been empowered by the sidelong glance of Lord Chaitanya. Vishwam Purna Sukhayate. The whole universe is filled with happiness. And where is there any happiness without peace? Isn't that a line from Bhagavad Gita? So that peace comes from complete absence of desire to enjoy these senses, but rather using them in Krishna's service, and the mind completely fixed on Krishna and relishing Krishna vibrations. What is it? Gopi Bhavara Samatabdal Halika Lalambagno Mahur. That line from the 5th verse of the Goswami song is that Rupa, Sanatan, Raghunath, they left their wealth, their influence, their positions, and became as insignificant. And for the sake of helping those, what is it? Takva Turnamasheshta Mandala Pati Shaining Sadatuch Bhutva Dina Ganeshiko Karunaya Kopina Kandashato. For the sake of the Dina Gana, the wretched of the earth, us, and everyone else ignorant of Krishna, they took on the most humble clothes. They became as renounced as possible, went to Vrindavan and did what they did, wrote and excavate, you know, the Leela stands and arranged for the temple to be built, following Lord Chaitanya's order. So they gave up these, 3 of them especially. Raghunath Das was a billionaire. You know, he was unlimited wealthy. Rupa Goswami, he cashed out and he had a whole boatload of gold. Billions. Gave it all away, 50% to the Brahmins and Vaishnavas, 25% to his family, and 25% kept it with a very trustworthy grocer. He put it in the back room, piles of gold, you know, next to the rutabagas or whatever. Inconceivable. But that money was then used to bail out, to get Sanatan out of jail. You know the story, wonderful story. So, but they weren't miserable. Problem that this story, I listen to the tape all the time, is that in Gandhi's movement, when that was big, there was this big lawyer who was very wealthy. He was making 50,000 rupees a month. And Prabhupada said, which is nothing to sneeze. He didn't use this term, but what he meant, nothing to sneeze at. You know, gave it all up and became, you know, like Mahatma Gandhi, just a mendicant. Couldn't live. After a month, he committed suicide. Why? He wasn't doing the program. Marashya Katam Rishta, Shunbandi Katayandija. He wasn't hearing and chanting about Krishna. It wasn't a spiritual movement. It was ultimately material. So Prahlad this is their chance now, you know, his classmates. Because they're sons of demons. They're being trained by those who are in the service of demons. Without Prahlad, they'll just grow up to be demons. But they have great affection for him and great respect. And so during the tiffin hour, when Sundar and Mark are gone doing what they're doing, Prahlad is now taking his opportunity. Oh, let me preach, let me teach. Because he's a sadhu. He's karunaya, you know. And this was the worst crime. It's one thing if Prahlad wants to do what he's doing, you know, okay, you know, I tried to execute you, but I couldn't. All right, you know. But this is now seditious. He's undermining the whole basis of the demonic society. This is the future generation. Now he's contaminating them with bhakti. What is this nonsense? So I'll take up my sword, and we know what happens next in the next chapter. So Prahlad is giving them this crash course in Sankhya, and of course, ultimately, you know, now neti, you know, that's kind of a code word for impersonalism, because that's what they do, you know. But we have our neti too, and that's the dehinos minyata dehe, and this other thing of understanding yet you're not the body. Prabhupada would, you know, he would say, you know, are you? We say, everyone says, my hand, my foot, my mind. You know, no one says I foot, I mind. Right? In other words, we're different from it. When you say my, it means you own something, or you control something. So that indicates that even in our ordinary language, it's understood that we're different from this whole contraption called the human body. And finding out what that is, we have to go to the Shastra and the realized souls. And that's the pure spirit, that's who we really are. And how do we act spiritually? That's the whole science of bhakti. How can we realize that? Because if you don't have a method to realize it, you may even know it, but you'll remain conditioned. You have to be able to act spiritually even while in the material body. And that's the magic of bhakti. We're sitting here in the temple, and it's not really material because everywhere you look, it is Krishna's influence. You see? There's the you know, what do you call these things? Friezes? You know, these pictures of Krishna, the wonderful pictures. There's, of course, the deities. You walk in, the sound. All the senses are connected. There'll be prasadam, that's also, you know, spiritual. The fragrance, the incense. Everything is there. The touch, you know, I need to get that, the flame, right? Senses, incense. Flowers, not so much. Some of the flowers. Maybe when the spring comes, we'll have more fragrant flowers. So this is a wonderful lesson, and we can also take part in it. The Prahlad is, of course, a Mahajan, and you know, ultimately, Prabhupada says he wanted to chant Hare Krishna. You know, he wanted ultimately. I'm not sure if something like that comes up here, but it's the teachings of Prahlad Maharaj here are extraordinary, and he learned it all in the womb. So we're able to benefit from the same teachings. And you know, this is this idea of the one who knows where gold is. You know, I don't know if you know this. This is a little interesting sidelight, but Brahmatirtha Prabhu was trained as a geologist, not where gold was, but where you can find oil. You know, so he's always had work. There's always a demand for that. But of course, now he's, I think, taking up mostly the mantle of the BBI. I don't know if you know that. Yeah, there's BI. I have a certain warm place in my heart for that. Prabhupada told me to work with the BI, and I did for as long as I could. But when I was there, nothing was happening. I felt I had washed up on the shore of ISKCON. You know, I'm the BI editor, but there's nothing to edit. So I got a call from the GBC in New York, Adikeshwar Maharaj, that Jayawada Maharaj needed me to come to New York and work on the Bhakti Gita. I said, thank God. You know, I drove up and I've been with the BBT ever since. There was an interval there where Prabhupada wrote me a letter, which I tried to follow, but it wasn't possible. And, you know, GBC is the ultimate managing authority, right? Okay. So any discussion on these points? This is classic Sankhya. Yes.
Now, two elements, the mind and the false ego. They're inert material elements, but they seem to be so powerful, as if, where's that potency coming from when you have a uncontrolled mind or a overpowering false ego? Because they in themselves, aren't they inert? So where's all that potency coming to completely turn us inside out and upside down?
It's the soul. We're giving the mind power over us. You know, there's this wonderful verse that's relative to this. You may recall, you know, Lord Chaitanya's teachings of Sanatana Goswami, so important in the CC. And when there's a set, you know, it's broken up into Sambandha Abhideya Prayojana, and when he starts the Abhideya section, Lord Chaitanya shares this verse. Now, it's interesting. It doesn't have a reference. Where's the verse from? There's a talk by Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati that had, a lot of it had been transcribed. And I read that, and he said he ascribes this verse to Madhavendra Puri. So anyway, it's included, I think, in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So he says, Kama dinam katina katita palita durnideshas. Tesham jata mayana kaduna nattapano prashantihi. Utstrijaitan adiyotupate sampratam labna buddhis. Twamayatak shadanamabhayam mamni yungsvatmadasye. I put it into a little poem. In how many ways have I sought to obey the seductive demands of my wicked desires? They've shown me no mercy, yet on I've gone shamelessly trying to quench lust's unquenchable fires. But now I'm rejecting these hellish desires, for my higher intelligence now has awoken. O Krishna, O shelter of fearlessness, please let me serve you with faith that will never be broken. And so we have to recognize that we're now in thrall, we're being controlled by the mind. The mind can be the worst enemy or can be the best friend of the living entity. So when we allow the mind to become filled with all of these desires, and then the opposite side, aversions or hatred, that can be even more powerful than desires when you feel someone has cheated me, So all of that, because we're enthralled, the lusty desires, the objects of the senses, they've got us in their power. We become attracted, and therefore we use the mind and the intelligence and the ego for satisfying those desires. That's sense gratification. And when we do it once, it becomes addictive, and they're planted in the mind. So the reservoir of those desires, where are they? They're in the mind. And they come out when the objects are there, or when someone reminds us. That's what advertising is all about, to plant the desires. So you have a mind, and the mind can also become injured with trauma, post-traumatic stress syndrome. You can't forget. You can't forget some traumatic thing that happened to you in your childhood or something, and it can cripple you the rest of your life. So the mind is related to the ego because you identify yourself according to ideas that you get. Just like now that it's this crazy political season. Of course, it's been that it's not always that way, but now it's really getting. And people want to belong to something, and so they keep talking about it as a cult. And this whole Republican Party has become a cult because they're practically worshiping someone who's not worthy of worship, and they're taking the whole world over a cliff. And it's all because of the mind. The things that people have suffered, that they remember, and they identify, and there's so many people coming through the internet. So the key in any yoga process, Prabhupada says in his books, is the mind. We're just starting the 6th chapter of Gita in the evening class, and Prabhupada mentions that in the purport. The whole idea of the yoga is to get control of the mind and fix it on the absolute truth and the super soul or whatever. So training the mind, purifying the mind, making the mind your friend is the whole process of bhakti. By hearing, by chanting, by not meditating on the object of the senses, by controlling the senses. And so that's why this prayer says, for lifetimes I've been obeying the demands of lust, etc., lust, anger, greed, etc., which all reside in the mind. And they've shown me no mercy. That's in the verse, but I've not been willing to give them up. Now, by my intelligence being purified, how? By hearing transcendental sound. I'm rejecting them, but I can't just reject. That's just negative. Please engage me in your service. The same mind, same intelligence, same senses. Engage me in the service. That's what Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is all about. So that's the idea, is that the mind is that subtle body, and that's the vehicle by which we keeps us in the material world. We travel. When the gross body dies, the mind doesn't, and the mind, intelligence, and the ego taking us to this next body. We've made our own bed. You know, so if you have the information of where you can direct the mind and how you can use the senses to get the best next birth, which ultimately is not spiritual if you can go back to Godhead, or at least a favorable birth to continue your bhakti, you know, that's there in the 6th chapter we're going to read. Then if you really have faith in the whole science and in the teacher, then you'll very eagerly begin bhakti yoga. And it's so simple. You can start with chant Hare Krishna. And as soon as you do that, you know, you're on your way. Prabhupada says, once you taste the nectar of Krishna consciousness, you can't, you know, you're finished. You can't, even if you try to give it up, you may bloop away, you know, but the next birth, you know, you come back. But we don't want to prolong the agony and try to go back in this one lifetime. That's my understanding. Best I can answer it. Dvijamani has a question.
Yeah, by default, the body is working on the mode of ignorance, and then intelligence is by the mode of passion, and the mind is by the mode of goodness. That's what Srimad Bhagavatam describes. Is that correct?
Well, it begins that way. The mind is the result of the false ego interacting with the mode of goodness, and the intelligence is the result of the false ego interacting with the mode of passion. I mean, at first you think, well, it should be the other way, but no, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
And then the senses come, you know, from the, then because we have a minute free will, you know, we can decide how to use the machine. The problem is that if there's no training, you know, the education is completely materialistic, then you're kind of stuck with that. Unless you get the association, the intervention, like they do with someone addiction. Everyone is addicted to material life, then they keep coming back. That's what it is. But if someone like Srila Prabhupada, who is not conditioned, can come into our life, or we let him into our life, and we hear and we associate with devotees, then that whole other orientation becomes available to us. And if we're fortunate, we can come out of the thrall. And that's what this verse is all about.
I'm wondering this question, if the mind is associated with the mode of goodness, it should be searching mode of goodness. And for instance, for devotees who get higher taste from chanting, but the mind is not looking for it. It looks like the mind is looking for something else instead of that mode of goodness. Why is that?
Well, you know, I think you're extrapolating from the fact that the mind develops when the false ego, you know, contacts the mode of goodness. And but that the mind is in default in the mode of goodness, I don't know if that's so true. The material mind, you know, because there's a relative spiritual mind too. You know, we need that in the spiritual world, but it's different. We leave the whole spiritual, the subtle body is left behind when you go back to Godhead, and you get a spiritual subtle body. But the material subtle body stays with you as long as you're in the material world. It doesn't die along with this gross body. So the mind is not necessarily, you know, in the mode of goodness. The mind can be deeply affected by the lower modes, and it is in many cases. Now there are people who are predominantly in the mode of goodness, you know, even in this world, but that's still material. And as we learn, sometimes the mode of passion becomes, you know, it's not pure goodness. So it has to be a determination of the soul through, you know, with the help of purified intelligence, that you have the understanding, no, you know, I'm no longer going to be enthralled to this addiction of sense gratification and all these material thoughts. I'm going to reform, and the process is beginning, you know, chanting Hare Krishna associated with devotees. And then the mind changes. It can then become your friend because it is in the mode of goodness. But the mind can be in the modes of, you know, goodness, passion, or ignorance, or any mixture thereof, due to our association.
What is the position of the material mind when the soul is relishing the holy name? How does the material mind feel in that moment?
Well, then the mind becomes you know, an agent of the soul directly contacting the spirit, you know, the pure spirit. So it's not you know, you don't have your mind. I mean, you have a choice, right? Like, I'll give you an example of, you know, memorizing verses. Right? If you memorize a verse, you got to use the mind. You got to repeat, right? You know, and repeat, and, you know, like that. And what's going on there is that because when you do that, you're not doing anything else with the mind. which you could do. You could do totally material things. But that's, this is, and then you'll have, I always compare it because, I memorize verses so many, like picking up a valuable jewel, putting it in your pocket, because you can call on it any time. Now that's in my mind, and I can call it up, and then, okay, now I can think, oh, beautiful. Krishna is, I don't have a poem, but a little baby Krishna is crawling, and his tinkling ankle bells are tinkling very sweetly around his waist. He's crawling toward his mother. Kinkani kalapam smitamukam. He has a nice gentle smile on his face. Ujjvala nasikagrumuktam. And he's got a effulgent pearl affixed to his nose. And he's got a fresh butterball in his hand, And his mother, he's calling toward his mother, and Nanda Patni, bringing great bliss to Nanda Patni, that's Yashoda. It's just a wonderful creation, and it's all about Krishna. And just by chanting that, even just, this time, it gives me a nice little dollop of bliss, What is that? I could have been chanting some rock song or something, but I chose to do that, because I'm trying to be a devotee anyway. But we've been inundated with these, beginning with the Hare Krishna mantra. If we really appreciate Hare Krishna, tunde danda vanita ting, we want to have thousands of mouths to relish the taste, So it's just a choice. We make a choice. What are we going to hear? What are we going to chant? What are we going to do with our senses? And when you start, bhakti seriously, you take initiation, then it's wonderful. You're developing good habits. It's like, I was a regular meat eating. I used to drink some beer on the weekend like that. When I was a kid. I wouldn't dream of doing that now. I mean, it's just, I'm not advancement, but it's like, are you kidding? It's like my lips curl in the taste, and I spit at the thought, or spite at the thought, as Prabhupada said. So that's a change in consciousness, but it's a result of practice and not doing one thing, but cultivating taste for something else. So it's all, the mind is then attracted, and within the mind are these remembrances. Just like, now because I'm getting older, it's a little harder to remember the verses, but if I can remember the first word or so, then it just comes out. It's like it's in a recording in there, But accessing it is a little more difficult than it is before. So that's a great value to have, And at the time of death, you want to be remembering the main verse, Hare Krishna, and and like that. And hopefully you're surrounded by devotees who are helping you to remember. What else do you want?
I like this analogy. When we chant, it's like we're washing ourselves from all this.
Yeah, it's definitely a cleansing process. It's purification. The whole thing is pure. Which is great, but it means it's already there. We just have to wash away all the dreck, and then we'll be in an original, state of bhakti, pure prema for Krishna. Highly to be coveted.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, wonderful class, wonderful discussion. I really like that.
Is that you, Dhanavari?
Yes, Prabhu.
Do you live far away now? Because we don't see you so much anymore. We hear you.
Yeah, I'm here till June in San Francisco helping my daughter with baby, and
I see.
I'll be coming for 2 weeks in April and then come in June finally, hopefully. So yes, Prabhu.
Okay. And then you'll be going out on book distribution like always.
Yes, Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu. That is my desire.
Yeah, ours too. Ours too. So you have a question, or is that?
You answer all. I mean, Vijamani Prabhu asked, and you answer all the questions. But I was thinking one more small question that, like you said, mind when we are chanting, when you are doing, trying to do bhakti, but then mind after you finish, or sometime there is a gap, or when we are not chanting, or working, or something comes, the anger, or some resentment with somebody, or something comes, then mind gets so agitated, and at that time, it's just I feel like I'm helpless, and I ask Krishna, please help me. My mind is not being my friend. So mind is such a powerful element. And I'm like, maybe I have a lot of dirt in my heart. That's why it's happening. So is that the right understanding?
Well, you know, we've been gifted, if you will, with so many wonderful prayers, songs, and some of them are directly instruction to the mind, you know, or prayers to Krishna. Prabhupada quotes, he gives the translation to this song in the purport, I think it's in the second canto. It's from Rupa Goswami's songs, which we also get, Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Dayate. But this is a different one, and the refrain goes like this. Krishna Bhavandam Bande Manmanasamadakadama Payanita Padapankachamakadande. Oh Krishna, dearest Lord, I bow to you and then entreat, please place the bee of my restless mind in the honey of your Lord's feet. Isn't that directly to your problem, right? Or how about Kunti's prayers? Tvaime ananyavishaya mati madapate sakrita ratamabhatara dagange vaugamadanvadi. O Mother's Lord, please ever fill my mind with thoughts of thee, not any other kind. As Ganges torrent flows into the sea, let all my love flow constantly to thee. So we can take these prayers, spend like 5 minutes memorizing, you know, the little one, or whatever, or just read the English translation. And really from our heart, you know, pray to Krishna. That you help me, please, Krishna, you're all powerful. Please let me fix my mind on you. Let all my thoughts be to you and not be diverted to anyone else. And that brings up, I'll just end with this if it's okay, it's right on topic. That Krishna Katashtaka, at the end of the Bhagavatam, I'll give you I think it's 12th canto, 12th chapter, beginning text 48, I believe. And he glorifies glorification. He's glorifying the glorification of the Lord. And lo and behold, we find practically word by word these famous verses. Some of you may recognize Nayad Vachaschit Badang Hare Yasho, the famous pilgrimage of crows verse that Narada Muni, he's kind of chastising Vyasadeva. He says, well, you've written all these books, you know, but you haven't written anything that's purely and purely about Krishna, his devotees, and his devotional service. And so, as Ashram Maharaj was not hesitant to point out, he asked, well, what did he compare it to? And I couldn't except say, you know, all the other things he had written, which includes the Mahabharata, which includes the Gita, and the Padma Purana, and all these. Besides all the Karma Kanda, you know, he'd written all the Vedas, you know. He wasn't satisfied. So he compared it to a garbage heap, because that's what a pilgrimage for crows is, you know. Because it wasn't purely glorifying Krishna. So, at the end of this Krishna Katashtaka, in the 12th canto, there's 2 verses. And the first one says, Yashakshiyam eva pradikshama parol. If you follow Varnashram very nicely, and you perform your duties very good, then you can get 2 results. Material wealth and happiness, and fame, you know. But if you hear and chant about Krishna with the basic principle of devotion, then what do you get? Avismati shida pada padmayo. Not just remembrance of the lotus feet of Krishna, but unbroken remembrance. Avismati means never forgetting. That's different than just remembering, right? If you remember, you can forget too. Intermittent remember. But if you're never forgetting, it means you're always remembering. And so this word avismati is used. And then the last verse is Avismati Krishna Badara Vindayo Chinotya Badani Chashang Tanoti Sattvasya Shuddhim Paramatma Bhaktim Jnana Chibigyana Viraga Yuktam. This is a verse that I read in the biography, the big biography, Bhakti Vikas Swami biography of Bhakti Siddhanta. There's a chapter on the verses that he likes to quote, and this is one of them. So he says, Avismati Krishna Badara, unbroken remembrance of Krishna's lotus feet gives the following benefits. Chinotya Badhrani, everything inauspicious is destroyed in your life. And Shang Tanoti. Sham is like we get Shankara, is the name for Shiva. He does good fortune. He makes good fortune for everybody. So Sham is welfare, good fortune. Shang and expands your good fortune and welfare. Sattvasya Shuddhim, purification of your existence. Padamatma Bhaktim induces devotional service to the Supreme Person, Krishna. Padamatma Bhaktim, the Supreme Soul. Characterized by Jnana, Vijnana, and Virakti. Knowledge, realized knowledge, scientific knowledge, experiential knowledge, and detachment from everything that's not Krishna. In other words, It all starts with hearing. And the first word of this ashtaka is Sankirtan, Sankirtamano, Bhagavan Ananta. And it goes through. So I made a slideshow for it. I do it sometimes when I do the Sunday feast, which is occasional. So the idea is that we have, if Krishna bestows upon us because we're sincere, is constant remembrance of Him, constant remembrance of the lotus feet, then everything flows from that. You can see the world is full of happiness, and you're protected from the slings and arrows of this material world, and your future is the brightest it can be, going back to Godhead. So but we can pray. So you can pray to Krishna, please, I can't control my mind, please help me, And if it's sincere, He'll help you.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Very deep with sloka and references. Thank you.
And don't
so
forget,
much.
if it's hard to remember slokas, we got that one memorized, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare. That's meant to be chanted prayerfully. Please engage me in your service. Please always let me remember you. Pray to the name, through the name. By chanting Hare Krishna, oh holy name, please let me hear every syllable. Let me not let my mind wander. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Haribol. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you so much, Hare Krishna.